There's this undeniable thrill in exploring the wild, in tracing the contours of untamed landscapes, and standing breathless before something ancient and alive. For Maya, that thrill was everything. She had found it early in life, when curiosity still outpaced caution, and her spirit burned with boundless energy. Adventure wasn't just something she sought, it was who she was. But nature, for all its beauty, hides danger behind its wonders, and sometimes the chase for awe demands a price too steep. For Maya, the lesson came too late. Maya Castillo was 23, a bright-eyed backpacker from Phoenix, Arizona. With a heart full of wanderlust and a camera slung over her shoulder, she had spent the last 2 years exploring the corners of the globe, documenting temples in Thailand, surfing in Costa Rica, hiking alone in Patagonia. Her social media pages painted a vibrant mosaic of fearlessness, the kind that inspired thousands. Her captions were always filled with philosophy, curiosity, and the thrill of the unknown. To Maya, the world wasn't dangerous. It was unfinished, waiting to be understood. Her older sister once said, "She's not reckless, just fearless." It was true. Maya didn't chase danger. She chased meaning. And when this particular December rolled around, instead of flying to Bali or trekking through Vietnam, she chose San Francisco. It was the city's hills, its fog-draped skyline, and its clear contrast that called to her this time. She told her followers she wanted to see where wildness meets civilization. It was supposed to be a quiet solo trip before the new year, just a few days of coffee shops, cable cars, and curiosity. But curiosity has teeth. On the second day of her trip, Maya visited the Wildlife Park, a large zoo nestled on the edge of Golden Gate Park. Her camera was fully charged, and the morning sun lit the grounds in golden winter light. The zoo was crowded with families, parents holding toddlers on their shoulders, and teenagers clutching soda cups. She was alone, as she often was, but Maya never saw that as a deficit. She liked the silence between her footsteps. It was how she listened to the world. By 2:45 p.m., she was already inside, her lens capturing the tremble of flamingo feathers in the wind, the heavy blink of an old gorilla, the snow leopard eyes watching from behind a cluster of pine. She wasn't rushing. She never did. Instead, she drifted from exhibit to exhibit, absorbing. Eventually, her path brought her north toward the tiger enclosure. The signage read Tatiana, Siberian tiger, 4 years old, 312 pounds. It showed a majestic feline, golden eyes locked into the lens of a camera. But Tatiana wasn't there for photographs. The enclosure had once been a highlight of the zoo, its dense trees, concrete cliffs, and glass viewing panels offering an illusion of closeness to the wild. But the illusion, like all others, had its cracks. Tatiana was no ordinary exhibit. She had a history. Earlier that year, she had attacked a zookeeper during routine feeding. It hadn't made headlines. The zoo had buried it in procedural reports and quiet changes. They told staff to follow new routes, stay outside certain zones, and speak less. Some whispered about her unpredictability, how she'd grown more erratic. But nothing was officially wrong, not on paper. Management had reviewed the enclosure and deemed it secure. The outer fencing, a waist-high barrier in front of the main glass, was considered more of a guideline than a wall. Visitors leaned on it all the time, oblivious to the history it barely contained. It was just after 3:20 p.m. when Maya arrived at Tatiana's enclosure. The crowd was lighter now, the winter sun slanting low behind the trees. Children were leaving. Parents were checking their watches. But Maya stayed. She stood at the edge of the outer barrier, camera around her neck, her hands resting lightly on the cool metal rail. From there, the habitat stretched wide, a mix of concrete elevation and tree-studded shadows. The tiger wasn't immediately visible, but something about the place caught Maya's attention, and she stayed for 30 minutes, which turned out to be the last minutes of her life. Eyewitnesses reported that Maya was just watching the tiger and nothing else. However, what the witness and everyone else missed was that the tiger had been watching her too. Tatiana had been lying low, nestled in the shadows at the far edge of the enclosure, her body still as stone. It was the way predators watched, patient, fixed, waiting for something unfamiliar to become vulnerable. The security footage from that hour would later show Maya scanning the area, looking down at her camera, stepping back, then stepping forward, then climbing. There was no hesitation. She hoisted herself over the metal rail like it was nothing, tossed one leg over, then the other, dropping to the narrow gravel space just beyond. That area was meant for staff, an empty trench between the outer rail and the inner moat. She shouldn't have been there. But she didn't stop. A moment later, she moved along the trench, camera still bouncing at her side. It wasn't clear if she was trying to retrieve something, inspect the habitat, or perhaps snap a shot no one else could. But at 4:50 p.m., she disappeared from camera view. What happened in those next 10 minutes was never known in full. Only fragments, only consequences. At 5 p.m., the first low growl curled out from the northern end of the park. It was subtle, like a throat clearing behind thick glass. A moment later, the sound sharpened into a snarl, a predator's warning. Some visitors turned their heads. Most didn't notice. But in the control room, one security officer did. Maya was no longer outside the barrier. She had gone in. Staff scrambled, radios lit up, but they were already too late. Tatiana had moved from her shadows. Down in the enclosure where the artificial cliffs met dense brush, the tiger began to circle. She had picked up Maya's scent, her motion, her unfamiliarity. Tigers, even in captivity, are not tame. They tolerate routine, tolerate humans in certain patterns. Break those patterns and their instincts flood in. By the time the first emergency call went out, Maya was completely alone. She had crossed too far into a place she didn't belong. The illusion of safety, the glass, the fence, the clean walkways, all of it had vanished. There was now only earth and silence, and a predator closing in. Tatiana wasn't just a predator. She was a wild animal, and can be unbound by any illusion of safety humans could build. Inside her cage, she had waited, not with desperation, but with the icy calm of something that had already decided its course. She knew her limits. More importantly, she knew the zoo's. The tiger's enclosure wall stood at 12.5 feet, tall by some standards, but not enough. Not for a creature like her. Across the world, the industry standard for enclosures housing apex predators was at least 16 feet. Tatiana's was outdated, built on cost-saving decisions and measured risks. But a tiger doesn't care for blueprints or budgets. Tatiana knew the weakness in the structure better than the staff did. She had tested it before. Earlier in the year, she had made her intentions known, clawing at the edge of her world, lunging at zookeepers, pacing endlessly near the boundary. She had once nearly escaped during a routine check, reaching the outer limits before she was forced back with tranquilizers and threats. That incident was covered up, filed away under staff error and internal memos. But Tatiana remembered. Predators always do. She didn't pounce that evening. She stalked, silent and methodical. The few remaining zoo staff at that hour, scattered and distant, never heard the shift of gravel beneath her paws or the breath she held in her throat. The snow around her enclosure muffled the sound. Every movement she made was deliberate. For hours she had waited by the rear wall. She paced, pressed her weight against the snowbank piled just inches beneath the edge, gauging its strength. The moat separating her from the outside world, a shallow trench of water and rock, was useless. It had always been. Tatiana's massive limbs could clear it in one stride. She didn't try until the moment was perfect, and Maya had given her that moment. Maya didn't realize she was being watched, not just seen, but studied. When she crossed over the visitor barrier and into the restricted trench zone earlier that afternoon, she had broken a boundary Tatiana instinctively understood. Maya was no longer an observer. She was inside. She was prey. Tatiana wasn't hunting for food. She was defending territory. When Maya wandered closer to the edge of the trench and the faint wall that separated them, the tiger's stillness broke. Tatiana surged upward. Her leap cleared the flawed wall. Her body, over 300 pounds of coiled muscle and instinct, flew across the moat and landed on snow-dusted concrete. In a single motion, she was free. She was no longer in a cage. She was in pursuit. Maya never saw it coming. A scream tore through the northern end of the zoo. It was sharp, high, and fast, a sound that didn't belong among the chatter of tourists or the cooing of birds. Nearby visitors froze. A few turned their heads. Most dismissed it. But a maintenance worker, stationed behind the service building near the tiger exhibit, did not. He moved toward the sound, first at a jog, then at a sprint. What he found sent him into shock. There, sprawled at the edge of the rear path just beyond the moat, was Maya Castillo. She had crawled partway from the snowbank, dragging her body with shattered limbs. Her clothes were in ribbons, skin torn in long, ragged trails. Blood pooled beneath her. The worker's voice cracked through the emergency radio, announcing the disaster. Maya's injuries were beyond horrific, gruesome evidence of a brutal and sustained attack that should have killed her. Her right arm was nearly torn from the socket, hanging by threads of muscle and tendon. Arterial blood had soaked the surrounding ground, painting a trail of her desperate struggle. Deep lacerations crisscrossed her back and torso, some so deep they exposed bone, each one a brutal reminder of claws or teeth raking her flesh with savage intent. Both of her legs were shattered, mangled by powerful jaws that had crushed muscle and sinew with terrifying force. Her face was a mask of trauma, swollen and torn, one eye swollen shut, her cheek laid open to the bone, the rest of her features hidden beneath streaks of drying blood and the raw imprint of violence. And yet impossibly, she was still alive. Zoo staff responded in chaos. Radios blared, security scrambled, visitors were ushered away, some clueless, others already panicking. Ambulances were dispatched. Sirens echoed through the zoo's winding paths. But time was no longer an ally. 7 minutes after Maya's scream, Tatiana returned. She did not rush. She did not growl. She came back with a chilling calm, the same patience that had defined her every move. Her eyes locked onto the girl, motionless now, unconscious or worse. The maintenance worker, now hiding behind a utility cart, shouted at it to move back, but it was too late. Tatiana approached the bloodied form and in one swift motion ended what had already begun. There was no ceremony, no second chance. It was over in seconds. The zoo's marksman arrived just as the tiger turned toward the sound of voices. A single gunshot cracked the air. Tatiana fell where she stood, her massive body collapsing in a cloud of powdery snow, red mixing with white. Maya Castillo died moments later. She had traveled the world. She had crossed rivers in Thailand, slept under stars in Patagonia, and stood at the edge of volcanoes in Iceland. She was brave, bold, and endlessly curious, but her story ended in a place that promised wonder and delivered violence. In the aftermath, investigators pored through the footage, records, and maintenance logs. Questions mounted. Why had the moat been so shallow? Why hadn't the wall been higher? Why was an animal with a history of aggression still kept in a flawed enclosure? The news update was immediate. But it didn't take long before the real questions started rolling in. Questions like, was this attack preventable? Why did a tiger have access to guests? An internal investigation was launched, and what it uncovered stunned even longtime zoo professionals. The tiger enclosure had been a weak point for years. The retaining wall stood at just 12.5 feet, well below the 16-foot minimum used in most modern facilities. The surrounding moat was shallow, only a few feet deep, designed more for aesthetics than safety. Tatiana, powerful and agile, had cleared the gap in a single leap. A grainy clip from a security camera showed it all. Her leap, her landing, her sudden freedom. It was over in seconds. A zoo spokesperson addressed the media, but for many that wasn't enough. Animal welfare groups were quick to speak up, not to vilify Tatiana, but to condemn the system that put both predator and human in a deadly position. 1 week later, a candlelight vigil was held in Phoenix, Arizona. Hundreds gathered under soft desert skies, holding photos and flickering candles, some wearing tiger pins in quiet tribute. Friends and strangers alike spoke of a woman who had lived without fear. Maya's parents, too heartbroken to appear, released a single statement stating that they don't blame the tiger, but the failure of safety, which resulted in the loss of both their daughter and Tatiana. As the world mourned, questions turned inward. Chief among them was, why had Maya climbed into the tiger enclosure in the first place? Speculation ran wild. Was it a dare? A stunt? An attempt to capture the perfect photo? Or was it a tragic miscalculation? What caused the disaster remains unclear. But the incident served as a catalyst for change. The wildlife park undergoes sweeping changes. The walls around the tiger exhibit were raised to 20 feet. The moat was deepened, widened, and fitted with sensors. Infrared perimeter alarms were installed. Security patrols doubled. Signage, once decorative, was replaced with bold, unmistakable warnings. And yet, even with reforms, the question persisted: when will we stop pretending the wild can be tamed? Tatiana didn't kill out of malice. She wasn't a rogue animal or a mistake of nature. She was a tiger, an apex predator caught in an artificial world that eventually broke. Maya died because the system failed her, because safety was treated as an afterthought, and curiosity was mistaken for invincibility. She died not out of recklessness, but out of trust. Trust in the zoo, in the walls, in the illusion of control. Tatiana died because we failed her too. We caged her, then blamed her for doing what she was born to do. In the end, both were victims of the same tragedy.